Hello, math friends, and welcome to Lesson 114, Simplifying Fraction Answers. If you remember, mathematicians are very picky about how their answers, their final answers are written, and there's a couple of rules that we need to follow. Number one, we need to write improper fractions as a mixed number or a whole number. So if you're doing your homework problem or a word problem and you need to add 2/3 plus 2/3, you know that when you're adding, you keep the denominator the same. That's the only time you can add them is when they're the same. So you write the 3 for the denominator. 2 plus 2 equals 4, which is your numerator. So you look at your answer. Is that improper? Yes. The numerator is greater than the denominator, so we know that it's improper. So we need to write it as a mixed number, a whole number and a fraction. And what would 4/3 be? Well, we know that 4 divides into 3 one time with 1 left over, and then you keep that same denominator, 1/3. So in math, you would never leave it as 4/3. You would always write it as 1 1/3. The other thing you need to do with fractions is you need to make sure it does not need to be reduced. If you look at the fraction 1/3, when you have a 1, there is no other way to reduce that 1/3. That's as small as it'll go. So when you look at fractions, let's say you had a problem where you had 3/4 minus 1/4, and you can only subtract when you have the same denominator, so that denominator stays a 4. 3 minus 1 is 2, and that's 2/4, and you know that's two even numbers, and these even numbers can be reduced. We can reduce this, and we know that we can reduce it to 1/2, and we know with a 1 you can't get any smaller than that. So 1/2 is the reduced number. So that's how we would want to write our math. I'm sorry, how we want to write our answer, 1/2. So you're either going to make sure that if it's improper, if this answer had been 3/3, we wouldn't leave it as, I don't think you can see that. If the answer had been 2/3 plus 1/3, let's look at that real quick because it's still improper. If your problem had been 2/3 plus 1/3, and that equals 3/3, we don't leave it as 3/3. We always write it as 1, because any number over itself is 1. We would leave that as a 1. Don't leave it as 3/3. So if it was 4 4/3, we rewrite it as 1 1/3. If it still can be reduced, 1/2 can still be reduced. 2/4 can still be reduced to 1/2. So you continue until you get to the simplest form. Let's look at another example. This is 3 1/3 plus 4 2/3. Now I like to write mine on top. I can't get it situated here. To write mine above each other. For me, that's easier. So 1/3 plus 2/3 is 3/3. 3 plus 4 is 7. So my answer is 7 3/3. When you look at that, is there something wrong with that? It is the correct answer, but it's not the simplest form. So what you do is, there's nothing to do to the whole number. It's as it is. But if you look at that fraction, we need to change that answer. 3/3 can be written as 1. So whatever you do to this fraction, you're going to add it to the whole number. So this now becomes 7 plus 1, or 8. This is your answer right here, 8. We change the 3/3. Remember, that's another way to write 1. That's still part of the answer, so you have to add it back to the whole number, and add the 1 to the 7, and that becomes 8. Okay? Now let's look at our second one, where we're going to add 5 3/5 plus 6 4/5. Again, I like to write mine this way. For me, it's easier. 3/5 plus 4/5 is 7/5, and 5 plus 6 is 11. So let me write that bigger here. 11 7/5. When you look at that, is there anything we need to do to that fraction in the answer? And yes, we do, because 7/5 is improper. That numerator is way bigger than the denominator, and it can be rewritten as a mixed number. Now remember, whatever we do to this fraction, whether we change it from this one, how we change 3 over 3 to 1, even if it's a mixed number and a fraction, we still have to add it back to this whole number because it's part of the answer. So this, let's change 7/5 as a mixed number. It becomes 1 2/5. The 7/5, let me write this better. Let's see. 7/5 becomes 1 2/5, and I have to add that back to my 11, which becomes 12 2/5. Okay? Let's see if y'all can see this without glare. Okay. 7/5, the fraction part, becomes the mixed number 1 2/5. Then I'm going to add that to the 11. So 11 plus 1, the whole numbers add, becomes 12, and then you have the 2/5. So that's how we would write this answer would become this answer. Now on a test, if I ask you to simplify, you have to show me this simplified answer in order to get credit. If you don't do this, even though this is correct, I'm asking you to simplify. So the true answer to the problem is the simplified answer. And you have to do that to get credit. Okay? So make sure you practice doing this, okay? So if it's an improper fraction, or which it needs to be written as a whole number with a fraction, or as the number 1, as the case of 3 over 3. Remember this one? 3 over 3 becomes 1. And if the fraction can be reduced, like when we had 2/4, this one, this can still be reduced even further to this. If it was 3/4, if 3/4 was your answer, that's as small as it'll go. If it was 3/6, we know that could be reduced to 1/2. Okay, so write the fractions in their smallest form and make sure that they are written as proper fractions with mixed numbers if necessary. So if you have any questions or need any extra worksheets, just please let me know and I can get that for you. You guys are awesome, so go to it and rock out lesson 114. Thank you.